A friend of mine is getting interested in fly fishing, and I told him I would make a video about setting up an outfit. So, fair warning to the rest of my audience members, this won't be an entertainment video. It'll just be full of diagrams and boring technical fly fishing stuff.
And now for a look at a decidedly different kind of life. The scrawny life.
Here we have a diagram of a fly fishing outfit, which we can see is composed of four different types of line. The tippet, the leader, the fly line, which itself is composed of four different sections, and finally the backing. So beginning on the left, we see that the fly is attached to the tippet with an improved clinch knot. The tippet is about 2 feet long and consists of a monofilament material, or perhaps fluorocarbon, and the tippet is the only part of the rig that changes regularly. You will cut back the tippet as you tie on new flies and so forth, and eventually you'll have to replace the tippet as it gets cut back completely. And this preserves the length and structure of your leader. And the tippet is also the weakest link in the chain in terms of its breaking test strength. If the fly becomes snagged or what have you, you don't want to break your expensive fly line, and again, you don't want to break your carefully structured leader. You want the rig to break at the tippet. And being the weakest link in the chain also means that the tippet decelerates the fly as the energy of the cast unrolls down the fly line itself and then dissipates through the leader and then finally the tippet. It's slowing down, it's losing energy, and these consecutively lighter and lighter types of line transfer energy less efficiently than heavier, stiffer materials, and so it dissipates the energy of the cast, allowing the fly to land softly. So the three functions of the tippet are protecting the leader and fly line in terms of length, protecting the leader and fly line in terms of braking strength, and also decelerating the energy of the cast. I prefer to attach the tippet to the leader with a uni-to-uni splice. I think it helps with accuracy, but there are other knots that other fishermen use. The leader is typically 8 to 12 feet long. For outfits where I'm targeting large, powerful fish such as carp or large smallmouth bass, I prefer to use a leader that is less than the length of the rod, which is typically 9 feet long. So the leader would be 8 or 7 feet long. And this ensures that the leader to fly line knot does not get pulled inside the rod guides where it could jam. If a large fish that I'm attempting to land makes a sudden run and that knot jams in the rod guides, it could break the rig at the tippet and allow the fish to escape. So I'll typically use an 8-foot or 7-foot leader for those large, powerful fish. But for smaller fish, trout and panfish, especially if I'm using a shorter rod, you'll need to go back to an 8 or 12-foot leader in order to prevent the fly line from spooking the fish. Tapered leaders decelerate the cast evenly, allowing the fly to land softly and naturally on the surface of the water, which is important if you're targeting stream-reared wild trout in a small spring creek. But outside of that sort of situation, I do not use tapered leaders because the different thicknesses of material don't stretch evenly. So if you hook a large fish like a carp that stretches the leader material, after you're done fighting that fish, the leader will just coil up in a big tangled mess and become uncastable. Instead, I will start with a heavy butt section of fluorocarbon line, typically 20 to 30 pounds. Run so many feet of that, however many feet I want according to the structure of the leader that I want to build. And then I'll tie to that a section of 12 pound or perhaps 15 pound. And then on that I may attach another section of 10 pound or 8 pound. So I'll build a leader like that instead of using tapered leaders which don't stretch evenly. To remove the memory coils from the leader material, you'll need to take a piece of leather and fold it over the leader, and while pinching it down tightly on the leader, you'll want to slide it down the length of the leader. And the friction, the heat from the friction of that sliding will remove the memory coils from the leader material, which allows the leader to unroll in a straight line towards the target rather than tangling up in a big mess full of wind knots. I typically attach the leader to the fly line with a nail knot, and it looks like we won't have time to cover how to tie these various knots in this video, but there's lots of videos online about how to tie all these knots, and you'll want to look up how to tie a nail knot without a tool. That's typically how I attach the leader to fly line, which is a fairly low profile knot that hopefully will not jam in the corners of the rod guides as it's sliding through the guides. Fly lines are typically constructed of a braided core material over which a PVC polymer material is sprayed, building up in thickness as it's sprayed on, and which gives the fly line its weight forward or double tapered or level structure. This PVC material can also be impregnated with other materials such as hollow glass microbubbles to create a floating fly line, or perhaps tungsten powder to create a sinking fly line. And these materials are also sensitive to temperature. Fly lines that are intended for trout, for cold environments, tend to become too weak and won't transfer energy in a hot tropical environment. And vice versa, fly lines that are made for tropical environments will coil up and become too stiff in a cold trout or salmon environment. So it's important to pay attention when you're buying these fly lines to what's printed on the box, what type of environment that fly line is made for, whether it's hot or cold. Generally, here in Iowa, I use general purpose fly lines that are intended for bass and pike, but also won't coil up and become uncastable in colder weather or in trout situations. The front taper is all about decelerating the fly and dissipating the energy of the cast. So a long front taper that tapers down thinly will decelerate the cast smoothly and allow for a gentle landing of the fly on the water, whereas a short, abrupt front taper is better for unrolling heavy bass flies that might not fully unroll with a longer front taper. The head of the fly line is the primary mass that loads the rod and is what the rod casts. And it may taper down to a running or shooting line depending on the structure of the line. And this first 30 feet of fly line is what gives the line its classification in terms of grain weight. A 5-weight line, for instance, which corresponds to a 5-weight rod, would weigh about 150 grains. A 6-weight rod, I believe, is somewhere around 180 grains. A 7-weight rod is somewhere around 210 grains, I think. And here are some various different structures of fly lines, weight forward being the most common type, but there are variations of weight forwardness. Uh, Depending on whether you're intending to turn over tiny trout flies or great big bushy wind resistant bass flies and so forth. And weight forward lines are the best for distance casting because you just cast that head and then that thin running line just shoots through the guides easily. Double taper lines are not as well known for distance, but they're more technically able to work with roll based casts, for instance, and present weighted flies. I use them frequently for carp, which can be somewhat technical. If mending is needed and things like that, a double taper line is often the answer. I've never fished with a level line, but they do exist. And you may have sinking lines that are weight forward and so forth. And on the very bottom there, I've sort of diagrammed my OPST Micro Skagit rig, which is the Commando Smooth, an integrated shooting head, basically. And it would be a very heavy section that's only 12 feet long and to which is attached a sinking tip of 5 feet. And that's it for an entirely different style of cast, an entirely roll-based family of casts. So quite a bit of variation in structure when it comes to fly lines. You can remove memory coils from your fly line by gently stretching it, sort of running your hand on the fly line and with a little bit of tension and gently stretching it. But in general, if your fly line has a lot of memory coils, it's either a line that's intended for a tropical hot environment and you're using it in too cold of an environment, or it's just a poor or poorly made cheap fly line that isn't worth the money that you paid for it. And that's an important point. I generally buy the mid price range fly lines. The cheapest ones and fly lines that come as part of a combo package and so forth tend to be lower quality. They're not really worth even the little bit of money that you pay for them. They're just going to leave you frustrated and make you give up the sport. It's better to just spend a little bit more and get a product that works reliably. Um, but on the other hand, it's probably not necessary to buy and the mid-price range lines that I buy at this point cost around $50 to $80. Um, and the highest end lines, costing over $100, $120, $130, that have a textured running line and a real advanced, super slick coatings that shoot a long ways and so forth. It's probably not necessary to spend that amount of money on a fly line. I mean, it's a Lamborghini is nice, but it isn't really necessary to get from point A to point B when a simple Chevy will do the job. So I buy the mid-price range lines. The cheapest lines are no good. Just leave them alone. But on the other hand, the most expensive lines are not really necessary. Nice, but not necessary. The fly line is attached to the backing with a nail knot that requires a tool. I have one around here somewhere, but I've lost it. And to be perfectly honest with you, I usually just tie a uni knot here of 7 or 8 wraps and just cinch it down carefully so the wraps are all side by side. And I've found that that will actually hold the fly line. The fly line will break before that knot actually slips. And lastly, the backing. It protects the fly line if you hook a large fish that makes a long run. And it also fills up the reel and prevents the fly line from developing really, really tight memory coils. If it were tied just to the arbor of the fly rod and wound up, it would eventually get really, really tight memory coils and be uncastable. So the backing fills up the reels fills up the reel and prevents that from happening. So there's 15 minutes of pure line talk. Wow.